Welcome to Animals Voice Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin McKenzie, and very excited to be joined today by Bob Joseph. How are you, Bob?
I'm excellent. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for bringing us in.
Yeah, happy to have you here. Bob, you are the founder and president of Indigenous Corporate Training Inc. And we're going to be talking to Bob today about a number of things. The relationship between Indigenous peoples and animals and working with communities across Ontario. So I guess let's get right into the interview. What was your background before you founded Indigenous Corporate Training Inc.?
Well, how far do you want me to go back?
Right at birth.
Okay,
let's
good.
Start there.
So anyways, yeah. No, my career really as a trainer started at BC Hydro way back in 1994. Although I joined the corporation before that, not to be a trainer. I actually joined to work on human resources and advertising and display and customer services, talking to that happy 2% of our customers that wanted to talk about their bills. But in 1994, I bumped into a manager for Aboriginal relations outside of some elevators, and we talked briefly. And she said, "Would you be interested in putting on presentations for the employees?" Which I agreed to do. And
sounds like there was an elevator pitch right outside an elevator.
It was an elevator pitch. Yeah. It was very serendipitous and lucky, and it really changed my whole life.
So that was in 94?
Yeah.
So you started doing some training, but under the BC Hydro umbrella?
Yeah, so it was just for hydro people.
Okay.
And before I'd left in 2002, we talked to over 4,700 hydro employees across the system, but we began to be benchmarked. And this was the really neat thing. Sometimes when you're working with First Nations, Inuit, Métis communities, you don't have the luxury of just working there yourself. And so we were at a meeting with some other companies, and after the meeting, some of the other companies called us up. "Hey, can we come and talk to you about that meeting we were just at?" And so we invited them to our office. They showed up. The first thing they said was, "So we were just at the same meeting, and we're wondering why the hydro people weren't getting beat up as much." And so we started to talk about our whole Aboriginal relations strategy, just one component of which was training for employees.
Okay.
And as soon as we finished talking, they said, would you train our people? And so as a hydro person, I'm training people for other companies. And before I leave in 2002, we talked to over 100 outside organizations across British Columbia and Canada. We've got a USA version. I've been to Peru, Guatemala, New Caledonia, and the South Pacific.
Wow.
Turns out wherever there's colonized Indigenous peoples, the history can be different, but the tools, techniques, hints, tips can all be very similar as you go from culture to culture.
So what would you say led you? You said you founded Indigenous Corporate Training Inc. in 2002?
Yeah.
So what led you to, was you had an epiphany that you needed to create this?
Well, just realized that there was just such a big need there, that people were interested in it. And so, at Hydro, I was doing Aboriginal awareness, which really was just sort of creating an awareness. But I thought, the sort of next level and what was starting to happen just a little bit was, so now that I'm aware, how do I do it? How do I make it practical when I'm working with people? And so after that, I really dedicated, the rest of my career to this day to the thing that we've been working on. We call it working effectively with Indigenous people. So we start off people with like an awareness piece, and then we move it to some of, say, the practical hints and tips. And then from there, we branched out into helping people do consultation and engagement. We've helped people...
Excuse me.
We've helped people put together engagement plans and, just how to negotiate with Indigenous people. So it sort of has branched out, and we train all levels of government. And honestly, one of the things I'm really proud of is when people ask me, "Who do you train?" Like I'm in a taxi cab or an airplane. I say I train everybody from the Ontario SPCA to the Department of Justice and at the federal government. So it's really quite a range.
Very unique building relationships with Indigenous communities. Can you give me a glimpse into what that is like? I mean, are there certain steps that you need to take place when you commence building that relationship?
For sure. So we have a book called Working Effectively with Indigenous Peoples. Our courses have this too. But one of the things I'm a really big advocate of is that people actually do a little bit of research before they go. So we actually put together this mnemonic, which stands for it's respect. So we want to do a little bit of research. We want to evaluate. We want to make sure we have a good strategy. in the presentation piece, we actually talk about eye contact, handshaking, pace of communications, how to do protocol.
Right.
And
I mean, respect has got to be such a
yeah.
huge part of that introduction and the building of rapport.
Yeah,
right?
it is. And most people actually aren't going in to be disrespectful. That's a neat thing.
Right.
They're all going in to be respectful, but they don't
But
realize.
there's a right way and a wrong way to do
Yeah,
it.
they don't realize that some of the things they do normally would be really upsetting to Indigenous people. So very common for somebody to go in and say, "Hi, we're here to talk to you because you're a stakeholder in our list." And, just if you call them stakeholders, they just get really upset. And it's not that they're being disrespectful. They just don't know what not to say.
Right.
And so a lot of time I spend with people will be helping them with what not to say.
Yeah, etiquette.
Yeah, etiquette. And I have a blog. We get over 70,000 visitors a month. It's since we started in mid 2014, 1.2 million visitors, and we have some free ebooks, 23 things to not say and do, and 27 things to say and do. And I can tell you the one of not say and do just outperforms the 27 things to do. And they're just both free little ebooks of practical advice. But the numbers, like almost 10,000 downloads of 23 things to not say and, 1,200 of 27 things to say. So it's kind of that seems to be what people are interested in when they come to us. I just want to make sure I don't say the wrong thing when I'm working with people. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I want to take a quick commercial break. When we get back, I want to talk to you specifically about animal welfare and some of the areas that touch on the industry that the Ontario SPCA is involved in. When we come right back with Bob Joseph on Animals Voice Podcast. Welcome back on Animals Voice Podcast. We're still with Bob Joseph, the founder and president of Indigenous Corporate Training Inc. Bob, we talked about before the break some of the work you do in building relationships and teaching others about etiquette in building relationships within Indigenous communities. I want to talk a little bit now about Indigenous perspectives on animals and animal protection. I mean, do you get involved in that? Do you see that a lot?
Yeah. Well, we're always involved, in the work that I do and trying to help people see across cultures. And,
Right.
And I always tell people, look, I'm not going to try and convince you of what's right or not right or fair or not fair, but I will let you see how other people see the same thing and actually try to find you some wiggle room in your work with peoples and communities. So, this would fall right into the realm and just trying to share some perspective. So in terms of animal welfare and care and that kind of stuff, and the connection to animals spiritually, if I think about where I come from, and actually before I share the answer with you, I should just let the viewers know that there's actually over 605 different communities. They fall underneath 11 major language families, which are as different as Spanish is to Japanese.
Wow.
And are broken up into over 50 dialects. So for me to actually say I'm speaking for First Nations, it's like
it's impossible for you to claim. I know what you're saying.
It'd be like asking the Chancellor of Germany, do you speak on behalf of Europeans? So I can definitely give you some perspective that way. So where I come from northeast Vancouver Island and the adjacent mainland. There's a group of people there called the Kwakwaka'wakw, and we our territory is from Comox to Port Hardy, and then the adjacent mainland and the Broughton Archipelago, and we have a big interest in animals. If I think about our creation story, the Gwawénach tribe, where I'm from, Thunderbird landed on top of a mountain called Mount Stevens, transformed into a human shape, and becomes the first ancestor of the Gwawénach tribe. In my mum's village, Kinkum Inlet, the Aodénach, they would talk to you about two wolves at the dawn of time. If you look on the back of the old $20 bill, if viewers look on the back of the old $20 bill, you see people and creatures crawling out of a clamshell, animals, and you see the raven on top. And so what we find is this connection that a lot of times will go back to very important events. The Thunderbird landed on top of the Mount Mount Stephen, so that's like our family crest. And but throughout the Kwakwaka'wakw tribes, wolves, bears, killer whales, thunderbirds, eagles, all of that stuff is right at the center of our cultural, spiritual beliefs. In fact, my traditional name, which was given to me in a potlatch way back in the early 1980s, is K'uk'sumnakwala. And K'uk'sumnakwala literally means a point in time when the killer whale breaches the surface. You see the dorsal fin, that first shot of air that comes out of the blowhole. I guess that's what you call that. The name, because my dad's a hereditary chief of the Kwakwaka'wakw, it literally translates to returning chief. So we have this reverence for killer whales and wolves and thunderbirds and eagles, and they're just, I don't even know how to really describe it, but it's very central to our whole belief system.
It sounds that way, and a history that is rich with animal involvement.
Yeah.
So tell me, how does that perspective impact the role of an outside organization like the Ontario SPCA?
Yeah.
Because we, in the eyes of the Indigenous peoples that you were just talking about, are an organization that's been around for the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
Whereas you have just described to me a rich history back to the inception of the peoples that you were describing. So what's the perspective within your community, those communities, of an outside organization like the Ontario SPCA?
Yeah, so, we obviously we would care about animals. We would love animals. We would revere them spiritually. I mean, when we talk about the Thunderbird crest, we would fight over that crest like Coca-Cola would defend its logo from somebody else trying to infringe on it. Yeah. So it kind of spans all of that, right? And I was sort of thinking about it this morning. We think about the Inuit. If we think about, when I think of Ontario SPCA, I think dogs.
Okay.
And so Inuit definitely have a relationship with dogs. I think they're like a lot of people, maybe at the SPCA and who support the organization. There's definitely a love for dogs there. But then I think part of the difference, and like I said, I was just wrestling with it myself, is they also relied on those dogs for just about everything. Transportation, communication, protection. There was just so much built in. And I think some of those things are there in, say, non-Indigenous cultures. So, yeah, that's sort of where I sort of have landed just as I've been thinking about it. Just,
Have you sensed Indigenous perspectives on animals or animal protection having changed or evolved in recent years?
I don't think so. I still think they hold a big reverence for them. I think that they're still really important to the cultures, and that they would still, I think the values would totally align with the Ontario SPCA in that they love the animals, they're trying to protect them. In some ways, they're if I think about maybe a Western society where animals are a thing that is utilized, it's not part of a group of sentient life forms. I think that would be the difference in Indigenous cultures, where it's not just something you utilize, it's part of a whole nother community. And that's definitely where I come from. We've got the sky world and the undersea world and the animal world, and there's kingdoms and all of that kind of stuff. So I think their challenge, probably when we think about reserve communities, for example, remote ones where they do maybe still have pets, they do wrestle with a fair bit of poverty. And so I think, if you guys are going in there and spaying and neutering and doing that kind of, they're going to love that stuff. Because, and it's not because they can't do it themselves, it's their funding's tied to Indigenous affairs.
Resources, right?
Yeah.
I've been very proud to be personally involved with one or two different transfers of dogs from remote northern Ontario, and I have sensed a different level of collaboration and doors opening, minds opening regarding working together to help communities where maybe they have a large number of community dogs. So we will go in and do a spay-neuter clinic, do some animal welfare, sessions, microchipping of animals, and then when we leave, be able to take some of those community dogs and bring them back to our shelters across Ontario and help find them homes. So it's been an exciting, the evolution I have seen from the Ontario SPCA's perspective over the last couple of years. I feel like there's really exciting work happening right now.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I think you'll be, the reception will be really good overall because of that shared values, the caring of animals. And it's not that they don't care, it's just that they don't really have the resources. I mean, when we think about some of the really broad political issues, clean drinking water, and I mean, they can't even afford clean drinking water. It's not that they don't care about the animals. They're just in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're just struggling in a different area. So I think, for the Ontario SPC to show up would be really supported.
Tell me where our listeners and viewers can find information about Indigenous Corporate Training Inc. I know earlier on you mentioned different e-tools that are available for groups that are trying to establish relationships with Indigenous peoples and Indigenous communities. Where can people find out more information?
Well, you can definitely check out our blog and our website. So it's www.ictinc.ca. So you could just type in Indigenous Corporate Training. There'll be a navigation bar across the top, and there's actually a link there that says free. So if you want any of our free stuff, just click on that. You'll find our free ebooks and templates and stuff that people can use. We also have about 500 articles, some of which we've talked about the spirituality of animals and relationship and all of that kind of stuff. So there's plenty of resources there. I would be interested, and would love to hear from some of the people that really support the organization, that they're doing the research, they're checking out the community's website itself, maybe Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada. Those would be sort of websites that you could go to as well.
Excellent.
With resources,
Listen, thanks for joining us today, Bob. Really interesting and educational for me to talk to you about this, and fascinating. I really enjoyed the time we spent.
My pleasure. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for bringing me in.
And thank you to the listeners and viewers of Animals Voice Podcast for joining us. We love getting your show ideas. You can email me at kmckenzie@ospca.on.ca, and you can find me on Twitter at ospca Kevin. Until next time, we'll catch you later.